Go. There you go. So welcome everybody to this session. I've lost count of which number of the session it is in our series called Baha'i Educator Talks, but I'm very excited and happy to introduce Joan Juanita Hernandez, and who will be giving the presentation today about her work or some facet of her work. And I have the same problem I did yesterday. You won't see my face for the duration of this class, but next time somebody will have fixed it for me. Okay, so I'm going to encourage her to introduce herself and her work. We become a little acquainted with her, those of us who arrived early, but she will tell you about where she is, how she got there, and what she does and what she wants to share today. So welcome to everybody.
I should have, instead of talking, I should have made sure that I can project correctly. I'm not sure at all, but we'll see.
I made you a co-host, so you can share your screen.
Oh, I know it, but it's not showing my PowerPoint.
Oh, okay.
Oh, can you see anything?
Not yet.
Okay, that doesn't help any. I should have done this before. You might want to turn off the recording while I fool around with this.
No, that's okay. That's okay. We have a cohort of people here, and they're patient. We understand. I want to tell you all that Joan is in Santa Cruz, Bolivia, not Santa Cruz, California. Santa Cruz, Bolivia. Okay, and she's been there for 33 years. And prior to that, she was 19 years in, where was it?
Guatemala.
In Guatemala. So she's been living in Latin America and involved in the field of education for a long time, a really long time.
Over 50 years.
Over 50 years. And I heard about her from a friend and collaborator of mine named Wade Franson, and also from Keith, and I'm so tickled pink that she's going to be able to present to us today.
But she didn't have to give video classes during the COVID, I guess. Yeah, we all had to struggle. We all had to struggle with these projections on the screen, doing with Google Meet and Power and Zoom. That was a mess. 2020, 2021.
Security and privacy.
So let me try this. Joan, I'm gonna rescind making you co-host, and then I'll restart it again. And it may be that as soon as you get the co-host thing, that you can see the button that enables you to.
No, actually, it's telling me to look under. Okay, now I think I did it.
Yeah.
Oh no. It's Touch ID or enter your password.
Yeah, what you have to do is go, there's a little book, little thing, 3 dots that are lying on the side.
I think it's going to make you leave and come in again.
Oh, yeah. Okay. She'll come back.
Keith, how long were you an educator in Latin America?
Well, it's 9 years in Honduras, and then 30 years in Colombia, and now a couple of years here. But I'm not formally employed in Bolivia.
Okay.
Joan and I are kind of neighbors. We live in the same city and have become good friends. So I've always wanted to learn more about transformational leadership. So this is a great opportunity.
Hey, Peter, can
Yeah.
you, I'm now off co-host because I just came in again.
Yes, now I'm going to go. You ready? Bingo.
You're, but are
You are
you
now
co-host?
co-host.
Okay. Okay, now this is better, except that I got so much open here.
So I have something that's shown
There
up
we
and
go.
I've never seen it before. It says ambient
Now,
recording.
okay, now we're great.
Now we're
Okay.
good. All right.
Now, before we get into transformative leadership, I just wanted to say that actually we had a lot of virtual classes, and in fact, they came out very nicely because we'd actually planned it before COVID, like the beginning of 2020, but we were able to give many virtual classes on transformative leadership through Wilmette Institute, and during COVID. So, and also I work with Noor University, and we did a lot of online courses, virtual courses there also. So yeah, we very much experienced virtuality.
Yeah, I imagine you did. It's just you never quite get really adept at this, at least at our age. So I always think I know how to do it, and then I mess up with something. So
yeah, I know. And I don't mind just virtual classes, but the hard thing is sometimes now that they are having hybrid classes, you mean like you have some students who are present in the classroom and other students from other parts of the country who are virtual, and I hate that. You can't attend both at the same time very well. But anyway, let's get on with transformative leadership. So I'm going to talk today about the history, contents and impact of transformative leadership. And transformative leadership is a Baha'i-inspired program developed by Noor University in Santa Cruz, Bolivia. It's a Baha'i-inspired academic program and was originally called moral leadership, in Spanish, liderazgo moral. Whoops, okay. And since it's Baha'i-inspired, but for a non-Baha'i audience, I mean, we developed it as a university program. In the books and workshops, there are some quotes included from Baha'i sources, but there are also quotes from a number of other authors whose thinking is aligned with Baha'i principles. Now, where did this all start? It actually started back in 1992 in St. Petersburg, Russia. You might say, how did it start there? People at Herzog University, which you see in the picture there, were very concerned because after the fall of communism, it's like the youth were running wild. That means that during communism, I mean, you had to do whatever the government said. So people did not develop, or youth did not develop, inner discipline. It was very much an external discipline. And so this university was very concerned about this. And I don't know how they first met a Baha'i, but they, in 1992, they invited a number of outstanding Baha'i educators to consult about a program that they could use with the youth to help them to develop moral values. And I mean, people attended like Dr. Farzam Arbab, Paul Lample, Dr. Aloyanello, and several others. And they met for about a week and they brainstormed. And they came up with an initial proposal, which now 30 years later, I don't remember exactly how long it was, but probably around 12 pages or so, which included the 6 elements of transformative leadership. No, actually it included the 4 elements of transformative leadership and a list of the 15 capabilities. So Dr. Anello, who we see in the photo there, who was one of the founders or the main founder of Noor University, brought this back to Bolivia. And it was like it was all divinely planned, because at the same time, or very, very close to the same time, he had been conversing with the rector, the principal of the only college or the only university, or it wasn't even a university, but it was like teachers college education, the only institution in the country that could give post-teacher college education. And this man who was the head of this organization, which was called ESER, Higher Institute for Rural Education, was very excited. And Noor University, at that time, universities could not give post-teacher college courses, that Noor University would train the instructors that worked with ESER's institution, and then this instructors would train approximately 500 rural school teachers. So I had already written a couple quite simple books, but I guess Lloyd knew, I had some sort of reputation as a writer. I was also giving courses at Noor, and one of them was on leadership. And so he pulled me into this project and asked me if I could administer it, if I could co-write the modules with him, and if I could also co-facilitate, the workshops for the instructors and tutors. So anyway, brainstorming together, we increased the number of elements of the conceptual framework to 5 and later 6, and the capabilities from 15 to 18, and published the first edition of Moral Leadership in 1993. From 1994 through 1996, we implemented the framework and capabilities with close to 500 rural school teachers working towards a title in community development. And then from 1996 until the present, there have been many varied uses of transformative leadership in diverse countries throughout the world. Just to see some of the areas and teachers and academic programs, which is where we started, there was the initial program with 500 teachers, followed by others with a total reach of over 1,000 teachers in Bolivia itself. There was a master's program with 1,000 teachers in Ecuador. In Argentina, there was a program with 300 teachers. In Latin America, in a distance education program, it was included as a module in a master's program in social economic development. And it has also been used quite a bit in Iran through the Baha'i Institute for Higher Education. First is a course in a master's program in psychology, and later the students who had been in the master's program were so enthusiastic, they asked if they could translate it into Farsi and use it as a required study for those studying for their bachelor's degree. It's also been used in the area of healthcare, especially through Health for Humanity, training health professionals in Albania, Cameroon, Mongolia, and China, and also as consultants in the World Health Organization's Good Governance in Medicine program, first in Jordan for representatives of ministries of health in the Middle East, and at the headquarters in Geneva for representatives of ministries of health from different countries. It has also been used in the area of youth leadership in programs in economically deprived neighborhoods in the 2 largest cities in Bolivia, including the conceptual framework and 9 of the capabilities, and making special, as you can see, interesting for youth, let's say magazines that talked about the different elements and the different capabilities. It was also used as part of a nationwide program in Kosovo. And all of these things that I'm talking about now are not all of them, but many of them were like in the 1990s and the 2000s. And there have been virtual programs in Spanish and English, especially since 2020, both for adults and youth. So this is not an up-to-date map, but it just gives you some ideas of the diverse countries throughout the world where transformative leadership has been used. The red dots show where it has been used as part of an ongoing project or academic program. So it has been studied in much more depth. And where it's only blue, it's like there have been like weekend or 3-day workshops, but they haven't explored all of the capabilities and all of the elements in such depth. Usually they see the elements, but in a short 3-day workshop, you usually don't get into the 18 capabilities. Now, what makes transformative leadership special? We're going to talk about 2 different aspects, and one is a training methodology, and the other is the content. So the training methodology has 5 aspects. We start by providing context, then move on to transforming mental models, then present a coherent conceptual framework, focus on the development of capabilities, and on forming a learning community. And then putting all of these together, this way of training often leads to transformation. The other aspect that helps a lot in the training is that the workshop designs are based on the learning cycle with its 4 phases of experience, reflection, conceptualization, and application. So it's definitely not what I'm doing here, which is just getting up and talking. But if we were doing this as a workshop, I would be putting you into breakout groups with reflection questions, and then after the conceptualization, giving you something practical to do, which would be the application. So it is very learner intensive. So that's a little bit like just a glimpse of the methodology. Now, a little bit about providing context, which is the first step in the content. So we focus on, or we start by talking about the processes of disintegration and integration, which everyone is very conscious of in the world today. They were back in the 1990s too, and especially of the processes of disintegration. But we always made the students or the participants come up with some examples of processes of integration, which they were able to do. And then after exploring these processes, we would say all of us have 3 choices of how to respond to this situation in which the world is living. We can be part of the problem, justifying our actions by the fact that everybody does it. We can be spectators, and this is where the great majority of people are. Lament the state of the world, watch the news, and say, it's terrible. There's nothing we can do about it. The problems are just too big. Or we can become agents of transformation who are part of the solution, aware that any integrative effort, no matter how small, does have an effect. Continuing with providing context, we also emphasize that everyone can exercise leadership. And we distinguish between being a leader, like being in a position of authority, and exercising leadership. And we say that every single person in any group or organization can exercise leadership, depending on the degree that they contribute to one or more of the primary group functions, which we define as accomplishing the goals for which the organization exists, promoting unity, because without unity, nothing can get done, and supporting others in developing their capabilities. So if you are involved in any of these 3 areas, you are exercising leadership. We also talk a bit about the idea of a creative minority, which was, as far as I know, first explained by Arnold Toynbee, who, as you probably know, has studied, I've lost count, like 21 or 23 of the civilizations that, have existed throughout the world from the time of the ancient Sumerians and Egyptians up to modern civilization. But the most interesting thing in his study is that he discovered that there were certain patterns into which all of these civilizations fell. There was a time in which they were rising, and this usually happened when there was a creative minority, when there were challenges that were neither too difficult or too easy. If they were too easy, they wouldn't be challenges. If they were too difficult, people would give up. But when there was the right degree of challenge and a vision of how to respond to those challenges, then often a new civilization began to arise. And I mean, when I say began to arise, I mean, this might take centuries, right? Usually at some point, the civilization came to a high point, but then it began to fall. The original vision was lost, or it became petrified, and people became unable to adapt to the new changes in society. But the most interesting part of this diagram is at the bottom where it says transition, creative minority. Because the idea is that while one civilization is disintegrating in the grassroots of society, a group arises with a new vision of what could be different. And at first, no one pays any attention to them because they're so small. But little by little, more people start seeing that what they are doing might be a solution to the problems which the disintegrating civilization is living. And so it continues little by little, almost unseen, developing until a tipping point is reached, in which great numbers of people start seeing that this might be the solution. And even when the tipping point is reached and the new vision becomes more generally accepted, as you can see in the diagram, the old civilization still is continuing to fall, or say it's not one ends and the other begins, but there is an overlap. Oops. Okay, it doesn't want to go on to the next slide. I'm going to stop sharing. Okay, whoops. So during times of transition, a creative minority with a clear vision of the principles on which a new civilization can be built has an effect far out of proportion to its numbers. Whoops. And as I mentioned, once the creative minority reaches a critical mass, there is a sudden shift and the vast majority of the population accepts and begins to practice the new worldview. Now, the interesting thing is, and there's been different authors who've talked about critical mass, and they don't all agree on the number. Some people say 3%, some say 10%, but it is very, very far less than 50% or even 30 or 40%. Because the thing is that the creative minority has a vision, whereas most people are just lamenting the process of disintegration. And so as a small group that is in constant growth, that has a vision, then it has an effect far beyond its numbers. So then we explained that practicing transformative leadership is one way to contribute to forming part of the creative minority and contribute to the process of integration. So that's kind of the introductory piece of transformative leadership. Obviously, when we're doing it in a workshop, it takes much, much longer because we're asking people to come up with examples of disintegration, of integration, what is the cause of integration, the importance of principles, and we go into much deeper detail. So the second part of our process is to question mental models. And we explained that a mental model, I think we'll explain that a mental model is an unquestioned way of thinking that we have absorbed from our environment, whether our family environment or whether from our social environment, without analyzing, questioning, or critical thinking. And we just assume that it is true, even when we have proof to the contrary. And the importance of questioning mental models is, we can see it through this example. If I have a glass that is full of water, and over here I have a cup of coffee, and I try to pour the coffee into the glass with the water, how much coffee is going to stay in that glass? Well, most likely it's going to be a very, very weak coffee. A little will stay, but not very much. So what do we have to do? First, we need to empty the glass of water, and then we can pour the coffee into that glass. So when a person has a mental model or belief about which he has never reflected, he doesn't change just because he is exposed to new information. He first needs to question his present beliefs. After doing so, he may ask, if what I have always believed isn't true, then what is? Only then may he be open to learning. So we begin by using participatory techniques. The process we follow has these main steps. First, we help the participants to identify typical mental models related to the area. It could be education, it could be leadership, it could be human nature, as we're going to see. Then, once they've identified certain mental models, we ask them, and we do this, we don't ask you, what do you think? We ask, what do most people think, let's say when they think about leadership? Because if you say, what do you think? People tend to become more defensive. But if you say, what do most people think? Then they've created a certain distance from the idea. And so they are more open to questioning them. And we usually question mental models based on two aspects: their effects and or their coherence with scientific truth. Once people have questioned the mental models and they're in this stage of, well, if what I've always believed isn't correct, then what is? Then we can identify or present the elements of a coherent conceptual framework. But it's not just enough to present the elements. We need to carry out participatory activities to consolidate the understanding of each element of the conceptual framework. So this is like very brief again. It's just kind of the summary, is just kind of the conclusions. But the three mental models which we most question are, or one of them is, the mental model of human nature. And that is because, as many of you, since you're my age, may remember that in the promise of world peace, the House of Justice says very strongly, that there is a paralyzing contradiction. Everyone says they want peace, but then they follow that by saying, but unfortunately, human nature being what it is, aggressive, by nature, people will never change. So even though it'd be nice to have peace, it's not worth my while, my energy to be striving for it because it's useless. So the mental model that we're questioning here is that human beings are incorrigibly aggressive by nature. And the word here is incorrigibly, or say it's impossible, absolutely 100% impossible for human beings not to be aggressive. But the scientific evidence shows that the progress of humanity throughout history has been due to cooperation. And that, in fact, like in small tribal societies, if there's someone who is too aggressive, often he is thrown out. Anyway, so this analysis leads us to a conclusion that human beings have a double nature. And we can use our free will to choose to follow either our lower nature or our higher nature. Then we go on to questioning mental models of society. And we see that a very common mental model, especially in Western countries, is competition. Competition motivates and leads to excellence. And again, in the document, The Prosperity of Humankind, it goes into this in quite a bit of detail. But actually, scientific evidence, especially the work of Alfie Kohn, shows that competition distracts from excellence and that teamwork leads to the best results. In fact, teamwork leads to the best results independent work leads to the second best results, and competition leads to the third. Now, when we're talking about competition, we also get into the dynamic of power and relationships based on Michael Carlberg's book, Beyond the Culture of Contest. And so Carlberg asserts that competition leads to a culture of contest or conflict in which the strongest, smartest, or cleverest dominates. And since this does not lead to just results, this culture of contest is surrounded by a culture of protest. I think we see a lot of that. In both the culture of contest and that of protest, people and organizations try to use power to impose their will on others. So the culture of protest, even though it's against what the culture of contest is doing, but is using the same strategies, the same methodologies. And so it basically is unable to change much. And there is a very good video, if you've not yet seen it, on YouTube called Beyond the Culture of Contest, in which Michael Carlberg goes into this in more detail. So I would strongly recommend it to you. Continuing, Carlberg defines power. First of all, he defines power as capacity. We have power to do something. But then he subdivides that into power based on adversarial relations, of power against, I'm working against you, and mutual relationships of power with, that we are working together. So he has this very interesting diagram of the results of the exercise of different types of power, and not only power against and power with, but what happens when there is equality or inequality of power. So in adversarial relations, where there is competition and there is inequality of power, what comes up is power over, which is characterized by coercion, domination, oppression, and a win-lose mentality. Somebody wins and somebody loses. Now, when there is equality of power, but there is an adversarial relationship, usually there is a balance of power. And this can lead to stalemate, to compromise, to frustration. At times it gets semi-resolved through negotiation, but nobody's really happy with what they had to give up. And so it's basically a lose-lose situation. But if we look at mutualistic relations of power with or cooperation, it's very interesting. Even when there's inequality of power, what we find is assisted empowerment. And we see this in the fields of education, in nurturance, in assistance. And so it is even though one person may have more experience or more knowledge than others, it's still a win-win situation. And then when there is equality of power, we get mutual empowerment, which is characterized by synergy, collaboration, coordination, and again, it is a win-win experience. Now, when we were developing transformative leadership and my relationship with Dr. Anello, I really experienced both of these. I had given a few workshops, but not very many. I mean, I worked as a university professor, but I hadn't given many workshops, 2 or 3 maybe. And Aloy had lots of experience giving workshops. And so we would plan the workshops together and we would give them together. And then afterwards, we would sit down and we would analyze how it went and so on. And then afterwards, because we had to give these workshops in different parts of the country, mostly in 2 different parts of the country, and Aloy did not have as much time to travel as I did, then I would go and give the same workshop on my own in another part of the country. So I felt that was a good example of assisted empowerment. By working together with someone with more experience and more knowledge than myself, then I was able to learn and develop my abilities until I could go ahead and do it on my own. And then as far as mutual empowerment went, I felt that when we were writing the books, because in the program, it wasn't just transformative leadership, it was community training rural school teachers as community development agents, and we wrote a total of 12 modules that they studied in 3 semesters. So there was a lot of writing involved. And as far as the writing goes, I had more experience writing, but Aloy had a lot of experience with the topics. And so, you know, there was a lot of synergic collaboration, brainstorming, building off one another's ideas. And so I felt that was a good example of mutual empowerment. Excuse me a minute. I need some water. The third type of mental model, wait a second. The third type of mental models that we question are mental models of leadership. And we find that throughout society, top-down leadership is very common. But it can be divided into different types of top-down leadership. We have the authoritarian leader who bosses everyone around and don't you dare contradict me. We have the paternalistic leader who sincerely cares for the people who he is helping, but feels that they can't do anything, and so he has to do everything for them. We have the know-it-all leadership, which we educators have to be careful to not fall into this, where we feel that because of our education and our position in the educational system, we have all the answers, and which makes other people, first of all, not want to share their ideas, and so we don't learn from them. And then the worst is manipulative leadership. So the question that we ask when we're analyzing the mental models of leadership is, what is the typical conduct of each of these types of leaders, and how do the other members of the group respond? And then we ask, after doing this individually with each type of leadership, of these 4 types of leadership, we ask, to what degree do these styles of leadership contribute to the 3 fundamental group functions that we saw earlier of achieving the group's goals, promoting unity, and helping others develop their capabilities? So the conclusions that we reach are, to some degree, all of these types of leadership can achieve the objectives and goals, especially when these objectives and goals are based on routine tasks and do not demand initiative. You can order someone to do something, and if they're getting a salary, you know, they'll probably do it. They might not be happy about it, they might not do it well, but to some degree, you know, the work gets done, especially like it said there, if it's routine. As far as unity goes, authoritarian, know-it-all, and manipulative leadership create resentment toward the leader, causing disunity. Or maybe everyone's united against the leader, but that's not unity either. Now, paternalistic leadership can create a superficial unity, but it is not of the same quality as unity between equals. Whoops. And none of these traditional types of leadership help others develop their capabilities. So then the obvious, let's see, people say, well, then obviously the democratic leadership must be the solution. And democratic leadership does have 2 very important aspects. One, leaders come to their position through elections, and democratic leadership usually tries to promote some sort of participation in decision-making. However, there are 2 types of democracy. Though what is most common is partisan democracy, and the other type we can call deliberative democracy or mutualistic democracy. And some of the differences, speaking only of elections and participation in decision-making, are the following. In elections, In partisan democracy, candidates compete against one another, which are all too often characterized by attacks on one another. In deliberative democracy, we use a process called elections without candidates, which all of you are familiar with as you are Baha'is. And people vote for those whom he or she feels are best qualified, and no one tries to influence the vote of others. Now, what I want to comment is we taught this type of election to these 500 rural school teachers. And everything that they learned, they had to repeat in the community with community organizations. So they introduced what we called election without candidates in community organizations in rural communities in Bolivia and also in Argentina and Ecuador. And people, generally speaking, people loved it. And they started electing people who hadn't been elected before, instead of just the traditional leaders, younger leaders with more initiative, with greater vision. Now, I say generally speaking, because in some places, the teachers ran into opposition from the traditional leaders who didn't like to be displaced. But anyway, what I'm saying is that this can be taught in, to the public in general, and it often has a very positive effect. As far as decision-making going, and partisan democracy is based on seeking personal and group interests, and it is affected by the lack of unity and the opposition of others. Whereas in deliberative democracy, we focus on the investigation of truth, in which all opinions are respected and considered in order to reach consensus on decisions which contribute to the well-being of all. However, even deliberative democracy only focuses on the processes of elections and decision-making without taking into account a host of other capabilities that are necessary for leadership, such as constructing a shared vision, taking initiative, giving encouragement, upright conduct, promoting unity and diversity, practicing justice, and many more. So this leads us to the third aspect. And so we take quite a bit of time, like preparing the ground. We don't just come straight on and say, this is transformative leadership and it's a better type of leadership. We really make people analyze, the times in which we're living, the problems there are, what can we do? What are some of the beliefs that we have that are keeping us stuck here? And even in leadership, what problems are there with leadership? And then we finally come to presenting the elements of the conceptual framework of transformative leadership. And there are 6 elements. Service-oriented leadership, that the purpose of leadership is personal and social transformation. Leadership has the fundamental moral responsibility of investigating and applying truth. A conviction of the essential nobility of the human being, transcendence, and the development of capabilities. So briefly, we will see what each of these 6 elements consist of. Starting with service-oriented leadership, generally speaking, and with leadership based on power, the traditional types of leadership, the leader commands and controls others. Whereas in transformative leadership, even though the leader may have more knowledge, more experience than other people, but he or she uses his or her capabilities to empower others rather than to command others. Other characteristics of service-oriented leadership is that it is not paternalistic, because the word service you might think is very similar to paternalistic leadership. But it does not do for others what they could and should do for themselves, but rather helps them to develop their own talents and capabilities. Teach people to fish, don't give them a fish to eat. It is motivated by love or by devotion to an ideal or cause. And there's a story that we always tell here about a nurse during a war who worked in a hospital, a military hospital close to the field of battle. And as you can imagine, she had to deal with many, many terrible situations. And one day a general visited this field hospital and toured it. And afterwards he said, I want to do this work for $1 million. And the nurse replied, I don't do it for the money either. Now, the point is, we make sure people understand this, is not that the nurse wasn't getting paid, but that what motivated her was love. In this case, it might have been love for her country. It might have been love and sympathy for the soldiers who were wounded. But when we practice service-oriented leadership, we are motivated by love, or if it's more to an ideal or a cause, we might call it devotion. I'm sure all of us here and many, many thousands of other Baha'is throughout the world are motivated by our love for Baha'u'llah, our love for the faith, and we make all sorts of sacrifices because of that love. Another characteristic of service-oriented. Does someone want to say something?
Oh, I in that story, what I heard was she just said, I wouldn't either.
Oh, it might be. You know, I elaborate on my stories. But anyway, let's see, we can't go all the way back again. Another characteristic of service-oriented leadership is that it is invisible leadership. The leader does not put himself out in front bragging about, look what I have accomplished, but rather always talks about we, what have we as a team been able to do? And we use the example of a sailboat, that the wind is invisible, but without the wind, the boat will not move. And sometimes I use another example, which is like from, in Santa Cruz, they have quite often, they have like presentations of plays or dramas. And at the end, someone, you know, everyone is bowed and received lots of applause. And then they say, then they invite the director out to receive applause. But if they didn't invite him, it's like no one he would know he existed or who it was or what he looked like. But at the same time, without the director, probably the play or the drama would not have come out nearly as well. So that is an example of invisible leadership, staying in the background, making sure that everything gets done that needs to get done, talking to people individually or in small groups, but not taking credit for everything. If credit comes, then spread it around. And then the last characteristic of service-oriented leadership is that it is a source of inner joy and satisfaction. So you don't have, so it does bring, it might not bring outer recognition, but it does bring inner fulfillment. The second characteristic of transformative leadership is we define the purpose of leadership as personal and social transformation. So we start out by defining what do we mean by personal transformation, and we say it implies the development of capabilities and or moral and spiritual qualities. And we define social transformation as through our involvement in groups, organizations, and society at large, contributing to an ever-advancing civilization based on principles of justice, unity, and love. Then we analyze what happens if personal transformation and social transformation are divorced. If there's an exclusive emphasis on personal transformation, like self-help, though I really love self-help programs, but as long as it's not exclusive, people often become concerned only with their own education, or if it's personal transformation through the development of qualities, their own salvation by belonging to the right religion, or their own personal benefit. If there's an exclusive emphasis on social transformation, so personal transformation, if we look at it on a societal level, we often see more like an emphasis on education and religion. And if everyone was well educated and everyone followed, let's say, my religion, then everything would be solved. Now, with social transformation, we see it more like an people go into politics and NGOs if they're more focused on social transformation. But what often happens is the achievement of limited results due to egotism, corruption, and power struggles. So in transformative leadership, we affirm that we need to work on both of them at the same time, and then they have a synergic effect. Through our personal transformation, through developing capabilities and qualities, it prepares us to give greater service. And through our commitment to social transformation, it motivates us to develop new capabilities. A personal story that I often tell here, this is from long ago when I lived in Guatemala. I had written a book called Education for Peace. It was a booklet for teachers. And somehow someone on a television station found out about it and asked me to give a series of 3 talks on the book. I had never in my life talked in television before. I was scared stiff. If it hadn't been for my commitment to social transformation in the sense of thinking that the contents of this book could be helpful to others, I probably would not have accepted. But since I did have that commitment to social transformation, I accepted. Boy, the first day while I was waiting for them to call me to go on television, I was like trembling in my boots. I was shaking. I was saying prayers. I probably said 50 prayers of difficulties, but I went through with it. The second time was easier. By the third time, it was like, oh, I know how to do this. So, but the point is that when we are committed to something, to a cause, to something that we consider will benefit humanity, then it motivates us to continue developing in our personal transformation. And the more we develop personally, the greater service we can give. Now, there is an interdependent relationship between personal and social transformation. In addition to what I mentioned before, if we are only an individual and we're trying to change society, often we can become discouraged because society doesn't move very easily. However, if we form part of a creative group of people who share our ideals, now I'm not just one. Now I'm like, let's see, in this picture, I must be one of about 15. So the group will support the individual in facing his or her individual challenges of maybe both in the area of personal transformation and in the area of contributing to social transformation. Furthermore, the group as a group, as an organization, especially when it's an organization, can have a much greater impact on society than one person with just a good idea. So it's good that Peter is getting us together and forming us into a group here. I've often, when I was first teaching this, used the example of Nur University, and I'd say it's like Nur University is a gigantic creative group, and within that big creative group, there are a number of smaller creative groups, each one contributing to different types of projects which are positively influencing society. The third element of transformative leadership is the moral responsibility of investigating and applying truth. And we affirm that these are twin moral responsibilities. The first one is the unfettered search for truth and acceptance of truth that we have verified through our investigation. Whereas the second one is the coherent application in all aspects of our lives of the truths we have accepted. We start out by talking about the nature of truth, and that people often fall into 2 opposite camps. There's dogmatism, fanaticism, I have the truth and everyone else must accept it. Or to oppose that, there is relativism. Truth does not exist. Everyone has their own truth. So we affirm that truth in the sense of reality or universal principles does exist. But what is relative is our understanding of truth that can always increase. And because of that, we need to commit ourselves to the investigation of truth. We also talk about 2 kinds of truth: contingent truth and ideal truth. Contingent truth is basically reality, what it is, the starting point. If you do a diagnosis or an investigation to see, what is the situation now, you are investigating contingent truth. And contingent truth can be discovered through experience. It also can be discovered through science. Now, if we talk about ideal truth is what should be, not what is, but what should be, what we want to come into existence, our vision. And this includes universal principles, which can, once again, be discovered through experience, but also through the teachings of the founders of the world's great religions. And there's an important relationship between these two types of truth. Once we have defined the actions that we can take that lead towards transformation. We might not see the whole path. We might just see the first 2 or 3 steps on that path, but we know what direction we are going. However, if we only do a diagnosis of the existing society, in our group, we might have 10 different ideas of what we should do because we don't have a clear idea of our vision of where we want to get. And if we have a clear idea of the vision, but we don't really know where we're starting from now, then we also can go off in a wrong direction or just copy what someone else did, which is why in the letters from the house, they so often talk about reading our reality. They're talking about identifying our contingent truth so that we know how our community needs to go forward to move towards the ideal truth. Investigating truth implies exposing ourselves to new ideas and being open to them, consulting with those who see things differently than we do and trying to understand their viewpoint, avoiding blind acceptance or blind rejection of ideas, seeing with our own eyes, and critically analyzing and comparing new ideas with former ideas. For Baha'is, it also implies weighing ideas and theories in the balance of Baha'u'llah's teachings. Now comes the important part. If we have the right to investigate truth, if no one is telling us what we have to believe, but we are investigating it for ourselves, the corollary is that we have the responsibility to apply in all aspects of our lives those truths, especially those principles that we come to accept as true. So one of the exercises that we do in our workshops, especially when we're talking about principles, is we ask those who are participating to identify just 1 or 2 principles to which they are truly committed, to which they really try to practice in their lives. And I had one student, a rural school teacher, who very rapidly was able to say that my principle is justice. And it's true. I mean, this was the time in the dictatorship. He participated in manifestations. He was imprisoned. He was very, very committed to justice, but understanding it as social justice. However, when we went to this point, and how do you apply justice in all aspects of your life? He came to the realization that with his family, with his wife and daughters, he was very authoritarian and often did not treat them justly. So gradually, he was able to change. And his whole family thanked me. But I mean, he sincerely changed. It wasn't just like saying, I'm going to change. It's like he started helping his wife. He lived in a part of the country which is very well known because it's machista. And he began helping his wife, sometimes in the kitchen or in other places where, around the house, helping out around the house. And he also became much more open to consultation, learning from their ideas and so on. Whoops. Now, what is the advantage of defining moral responsibility as the investigation and application of truth? Because often if we think of, moral responsibility, we'll say, well, you have to be truthful and honest and generous and practice solidarity. And we come up with a whole list of good qualities, but it's too long. If we make a long list of correct behaviors, it's kind of, we don't pay any attention to any of them, or we forget everything that's on the list. Like right now, I was only The other advantage is, aside from no longer having this long list, nobody tells us what to do. Nobody told this school teacher that he had to start, collaborating more at home. He came up with it himself because he realized that that was also part of justice. Furthermore, it adapts to each person's level of moral development. There's a saying that, it's kind of like a saintly action for the sinner is a sin for the saint. It might not be exactly like that, but the idea is that each person, according to their level of moral development, have new challenges, and they're not all the same. So if we just write down one standard list of moral qualities that everyone has to practice, for some people it's going to seem impossible, and for other people it's going to be, I can do this without even trying. Anyway, so that kind of is part of the explanation of the benefits of defining moral responsibility as the investigation and application of truth, and especially speaking not just of contingent truth, but also of ideal truth and the importance of principles. The fourth element of transformative leadership is a conviction of the essential nobility of human beings. And we affirm that both science and religion support this belief in the essential nobility of human beings. Religion affirms that man has been created in the image of God, and that his heart responds to noble ideals and principles. And science, especially humanistic psychology, affirms and has experimented that each person has an innate tendency towards growth, and that relationships based on acceptance, empathy, and congruence or authenticity liberate this tendency. So what does this imply for each of us? On the individual level, it means that we need to exercise our free will to turn towards our higher nature, because we have a double nature, as we saw way back at the beginning when we were seeing the mental models of human nature. So we have a higher nature, we have a lower nature, and our heart is like a mirror, and we can choose towards which of these we are going to turn and reflect in our lives. So by exercising self-discipline, we prevent ourselves from being pulled into negative actions by our lower nature, and we consciously choose actions and activities that strengthen our higher nature. And what does it imply in our relationships with others? We look for their potential. We look for those hidden gems that each one has in the mind of their hearts. At the same time, we recognize that qualities and capabilities develop gradually. We're not going to think that somebody is going to change overnight, but we do believe that they can change. And we help them to change and develop through encouragement and positive expectations. And we go quite a bit into positive expectations and how they can influence people. The fifth element is transcendence. So what is transcendence and why is it important? We say that transcendence implies detaching ourselves from the limitations of current reality and achieving a feeling of connection with the eternal, with those eternal values and principles to which we are committed, detaching from contingent truth and concentrating more on ideal truth. And we use an example of a football game, or it could be a soccer game, but that who do you think has a clear idea of everything that's happening on the field? One of the players or a knowledgeable fan who is sitting in the stands? Usually the player only knows what is happening in his immediate surroundings. You know, the person who's rushing at him. Whereas the person, the knowledgeable fan, can kind of see the whole field, different people. That person's running out there. Maybe he's going to be open for a pass. So basically the idea of transcendence is getting off the field and getting up into the stands. And this is very helpful because, first of all, it can keep us from drowning in a glass of water, reminding us of the big picture. Often when we're working on the project and we run into a stumbling block, oh, this is going too fast. We run into a stumbling block and we get so upset about it, I can't figure out this and it's not working. You know, Transcendence helps us, you know, that this is just one little part of what we're doing and it will all work out. It also gives us strength to practice transformative leadership in spite of the challenges, and gives us strength to face and overcome temptation when we are in danger of going against our principles. And it helps to raise consultation to the level of principle, helping us to detach from personal interests. So the big question is, how do we achieve transcendence? For those who have a spiritual orientation, often prayer and meditation are two very powerful means to achieve transcendence. But there are other means. You don't necessarily have to be religious. For some, communing with nature, going for a walk in the woods, sitting under a tree and just watching what's happening around you. Could be listening to music, consulting with someone with greater vision or spiritual maturity, or concentrating on our vision. Why are we engaged in this activity? So we usually right now, I mean, at this point, we ask everyone to think, because the word transcendence isn't something we use very often, but we ask people to think about some moment in their life or some type of situation in their life in which they need to practice transcendence and how they do it. Because what we have found is that most people already practice some form of transcendence. They've just never given it a name. And once they become more conscious of what they do and how it helps them, then in the future, when they're in difficult situations, they can more consciously decide, I think I'm just going to go for a walk, or I'm going to go talk with somebody, you know, with so-and-so, because she always helps me to see things more clearly. So the point is mostly here is to become conscious of the benefits of transcendence and then to practice it in our lives. And the last element of transformative leadership is the development of capabilities. And capabilities, I think this originally came from Fundijk, are divided into 4 components, which are concepts, skills, attitudes, and qualities. And all too often in education, we only focus on concepts, occasionally a little bit on skills, but all too often it's learn these concepts and answer them on the test. Now, we've divided, because of the fact that in transformative leadership, we have 18 types of capabilities. We have divided the capabilities into different groups. And aside from the 18 capabilities of transformative leadership, we also speak of technical capabilities, which are those that you usually develop by going to an institute, a university, preparing for a specific job. And they are different for different professions and jobs. But the capabilities of transformative leadership, we have divided into capabilities that contribute to personal transformation, those that contribute to bettering interpersonal relationships, and those that contribute to social transformation. The capabilities that contribute to personal transformation, we can see here. There are 3 related to thought, learning from reflection on action, self-evaluation, and systemic thinking. Then there are 2 related to action, initiative, and perseverance. And then there are two that are basically related to conduct, which are self-discipline and rectitude of conduct. The capabilities that improve interpersonal relationships are imbuing thoughts and actions with love, giving encouragement, decision-making through consultation, and creating unity and diversity. And those that contribute to social transformation are contributing to the establishment of justice, transforming relationships of domination, developing a historical perspective, cooperation, formulating a vision based on principles, empowering education, and serving on institutions which empower others. And then we have one integrative capability, the capability to be a loving, responsible member of a family, because we promote, we affirm that we need to begin practicing transformative leadership in the family. We can't be, what is it? Oh, there's a saying, but I just forgot it. But anyway, like beautiful out in society and a mess at our home. We need to practice it and start by practicing in the home. So the family is the ideal place to begin this practice. And furthermore, children can begin to learn and practice the capabilities from an early age. So this is a very, very, very brief, maybe not so brief because it took an hour, but according to the content that exists, I mean, I can easily give a 3-day workshop to go through with the participatory exercises, the reflections, the applications, to use basically the conceptual part that's here, but really getting people to think about it, talk about it, apply it to their own lives. So what is the effect of all this? And I just have a few comments from participants from different parts of the world. One of the teachers from Bolivia said, I believe that everyone can practice leadership, but leadership with a purpose based on ethical principles, in which one is conscious that in order to exercise leadership, it is necessary to develop capabilities and to think of others and help them to develop capabilities. In China, where Mekadim especially use this a lot, is it China or Mongolia? I'm not sure. Okay, but anyway, the comment was, the response has been universally positive. Some even saying that it transformed their lives and vastly improved their work. I have found it to be indispensable in the work I am doing, developing systems for elimination of avoidable blindness. It helps create an ethical framework in which medical professionals can feel safe and use their growing skills for service instead of self-promotion. It has been a real gift that is universally accepted regardless of religion or no religion. One of the students from Iran said, this course was fantastic. I really enjoyed it and learned a lot. I used some parts, the leadership chapters, in the course I'm teaching. And someone from Canada. The course, this one is recent. This was from someone who took the course just last June. This course will change the way you view the world and your role within it. Joan uses a variety of mediums to convert complex theories into easy to absorb concepts, which build upon each other, leading the learner not only to gain a deep understanding of this revolutionary information, but a thirst for more. Many of the strategies learned in the course can be assimilated and applied into your everyday life almost immediately. I highly recommend this course for anyone wanting to learn new ways in which to facilitate dynamic change within your organization, community, family, or even just yourself. Now, the question is, how come it has had such a great impact in so many different fields, in so many different countries, and during so much time? At the beginning with Eloy, we would say, what did we do right? Like how come when we did the evaluation of the first course, I think it was 99.9% or over 99% of the teachers said the most important part of the course for them had been moral leadership. And I mean, some of the possible reasons that it has such a positive impact on people from different professions, and from all over the world is its emphasis on topics such as service, personal and social transformation, and commitment to principles. These types of topics touch the essential nobility of many participants and inspire them to put into practice what they are learning. Also, the organized presentation of the conceptual framework and the capabilities make it relatively easy to remember and apply. You know, there's only 6 elements. So it's fairly easy after you've worked with them a lot. If I say, what are the 6 elements of transformative leadership? Yeah, okay, I can name them off. The capabilities, since there's 18, it's a bit more challenging, but especially if you group them into the types of capabilities. Yeah, the 4 capabilities related to interpersonal relationships are, you know, giving love, giving encouragement, consultation, and unity and diversity. And especially the well-organized use of participatory techniques throughout the workshop help the participants to become personally involved with what they are learning. So what are some of the resources if you want to use transformative leadership? The main book in English, which was published in 2014, is the one on the left, called Transformative Leadership, Developing the Hidden Dimension. Then we developed a workbook, which is called Transformative Leadership, Mastering the Hidden Dimension. The workbook is completely only consists of exercises, group questions. Like if you want to study transformative leadership in a group, and you don't have much experience with you, get the workbook also, and then that will guide you through questions that you can discuss in your group and different types of activities. And then we started having lots of experience with youth, especially since 2020, when we started giving these programs with Wilmette Institute, and they were concerned about all the youth shut up in their home during the pandemic. Actually, it started before. It started about in 2018, but especially took off with the courses in Wilmette Institute. And so we have a youth version of the book, which is, we could say that it summarizes the different sections or contents of the Transformative Leadership book. And it also has many activities, especially art activities. But then we said, yes, but there's also people who want to give this in their community, and they might not be professionals, or they might not really want to sit down and read the whole book. What can we use for community organizations? So we developed the book Transformative Leadership for Community Organization, which is quite similar to the youth version, except that the examples obviously are from community organizations rather than youth. The book has been translated to date in Spanish, which is where it started, where it has been published in 4 editions, in English, also in Chinese and Farsi, and we have a PDF in French. There are also books available on several of the capabilities, some of them because they didn't all fit into the slide here, but like giving love and encouragement focuses on those 2 capabilities of bettering interpersonal relationships. From justice to unity, how just actions contribute to a peaceful world, actually focuses on 3 capabilities, which are establishing justice, transforming dominating relationships, and historical perspective. And then how to design transformative workshop goes into detail in what I talked about in transformative training. We have a whole book on it, how to do that. And then results-based leadership focuses on developing a shared principle-based vision. And you can find all of these books on Amazon. You know, you can look at, the fastest way is to go to the tinyurl.com, Joan Hernandez, but probably if you just go to Joan Hernandez and just look on Amazon, you'll start seeing some of my books there. So, how can I learn more? As I mentioned, you can read the books, preferably with friends, so you can discuss the topics. You can attend the courses Cultivating Transformative Leadership and Cultivating the Capabilities of Transformative Leadership, offered by Wilmette Institute. Cultivating, I don't think I put the dates on here yet. Oh, yes, I did. The next course of Cultivating Transformative Leadership, which is kind of the part 1 course that goes through all of the preliminaries, transforming context, mental models, and the 6 elements of transformative leadership, is going to be on March 13th, 2024. And the part 2 course, Cultivating the Capabilities of Transformative Leadership, begins in a couple weeks on November 8th, 2023. Also, for those who study Cultivating Transformative Leadership in March, there's going to be another capabilities course in July, if I'm not mistaken, of 2024. And if you're really impatient and want to go into the November 8th course now, you can do it with my permission, but you need to get the book and at least have read part 1 before you go into part 2. And so that is it, and I hope it hasn't been overly long. So now I have finished with my part. If you have any comments, questions, I'm open, or I turn this back over to Peter.
That was wonderful. That was terrific. I mean, that's a tour de force. I mean, it's sort of like summarizing a 900-page book.
Yeah, it's a 3-day workshop.
and actually, for most of the people here, it's really helpful to get that overview, because then we can we can drill down. And so, one of the things that I was thinking about, perhaps maybe a year or 2 from now, we can start doing actual courses, because there are a number of people who have developed really terrific courses, and we can actually do courses and offer them as a series, and then we can have, and of course, open up to everybody. It wouldn't just be for us, And by the way, I invited 158 people to these sessions, and the reality is that people have busy lives. And one of the reasons why we have conferences and symposia and that sort of thing is because people plan months ahead, sometimes years ahead, to go and do something, to hang out with a group of people who have a shared interest. And then they go and they do that. And that's the one chance that they get to do it for a decade. And so really, this is, to be able to use Zoom in some ways makes it very, very accessible to people. But on the other hand, those people who are really busy are still really busy. I've noticed people come in, somebody came into the class to this presentation 10 minutes ago, and somebody else came in like a half an hour ago. And so what it meant was that's, they wanted to come early, but that's what they could manage to fit in. And one of the ways we're going to work to mitigate that situation is every single one of these sessions is recorded, every single one. And when my techie comes back from vacation, he's going to help me to transfer them over to our YouTube channel and our Facebook group. And so they will be publicly available, and then all of you will be informed. I'll send you the links so that you know how to access them, and you can just share them with whoever you want. So I really hope that this kind of information about, your work and the work of other people who have presented here is going to go viral, because it should. There are so many teachers out there who are just looking for material. They don't have a clue. I mean, this, Joan, from your work, is that there are just thousands and thousands of schools in any one country that could benefit so much from this approach. And they don't know about it. And because they don't know about it, they don't do it. And And the more we can get the word out to people, the greater the impact is going to be. And
Okay.
I'm particularly really excited to know that you're translating things and you have things already in Spanish. And translating things now because of AI is going to be so much easier to do. We're going to be able to spread things throughout the world. If people are interested in your course in Albania, we can have a version in Albanian inside of a day. It's that quick now to do those kind of translations. So go ahead. What are you going to say?
Yeah. I mean, if you want a course rather than, in a 1 hour explanation, 1 hour explanations don't transform anybody. If you want a course, just with my experience with virtual courses, like both the courses I've given in WOMED and also courses which I give in Spanish, usually what we've done is like a 6 to 7 week course, like a couple hours a week, once a week, but at a specific time. And people have to sign up for it, not just come in. Another possibility I'm just throwing ideas at you. Another possibility you might want to think about is, since you are friends with Desert Rose Institute, like having more than one of us, like a series of, like I could give a 3-day course on transformative leadership and someone else, Ben could give a course on, what did he talk about yesterday? Of critical thinking. And, and so that there would be a series of courses, but long enough for people to actually learn enough that they feel confident applying rather than just hearing about it. So anyway, just a couple thoughts.
Yeah, I think they're both very good thoughts. I think, though, that the way forward, at least for what I want to do, is I want to use Zoom. And the reason why is because what I've been running an institution up in the Sierra Nevada of California. It has 45 beds. It has a commercial kitchen, a huge basketball court. We now have 92 acres, actually 100 acres now. It's a huge facility, and it's too expensive to get people here, and it's too expensive to run, and it doesn't make any sense because we can do effective education through this medium just as well as we can face-to-face. I love giving bear hugs to people, to be honest with you. I'm a real touchy-feely guy, but this is the next best thing to it. It really is, because I see your faces, and faces express so much of the personality and of the emotion of the person. And so, and the tone of voice also. And we get all of that on Zoom, In fact, we get it better, Joan, than we do in the classroom. Because in the classroom, the teacher is way off in the front, right? And unless you're sitting on the front row, you can't watch the teacher the way that you can watch on video. So I think that this is one of the reasons why movies took off. Everybody used to watch plays and staged presentations, and everybody loved that. But then when movies came, it gave us a level of intimacy with the performer that we didn't have on the stage because they were so far away. And also the added distraction of I think that the other thing about the classroom is that there are all kinds of things that distract our attention. And nothing's distracting my attention. I'm sitting in my office. There's nobody here except me. And I can listen and hear everything you say. And I can sit down and write notes to like, how many pages of notes has Keith written today? I love it. Every time he hears a presentation, he says, well, I've written 2 pages of notes. I love it. But you see that we can do that because we can concentrate. We can focus. And very often, the more traditional kind of classroom instruction you've got a hard time focusing. People have to go and take potty breaks. They can't really sustain just sitting in one position for a long period of time when they're surrounded by other people. So
when the participatory methodology, they don't have to sit in one position for a long time. You're constantly forming groups and coming back and reporting and so on. But anyway, but no,
that's true.
I get your
Well,
point. And the hard thing, the hard thing is that, with Zoom is how do you get people to commit to come back on a regular basis, like for a course? Because if it's just an hour-long program like this, like what I said about capabilities, they don't develop capabilities, they get concepts.
Okay, so I still want to encourage you to do that. And the reason why is because I taught for Wilmot Institute for 10 years.
Yeah.
And I created courses for them.
Yeah.
And I didn't have any problem with the people who were really interested in the topic. If there were people that were sort of wishy-washy about their interest, they'd drop off. But it's okay. They found something else that they wanted to do more, right? But the people who were really committed, they stuck in with it. And that was a number of years ago. But more recently, I spent the better part of a year with 2 books. One was the Persian Bayan, for which I founded a provisional translation. And then the second was the Kitab-i-Igan. And I served as the facilitator for a group of people that studied both of those books. And we spent months every single week for 2 hours a week for months. And the same group of people stuck with it all the way to the end.
Okay, that's what you need.
So I know that we've got the capacity in the Baha'i community for people to do that. It's just they've got to really want it. If they really want it, they'll keep coming back.
That's true.
I'd like to ask a question. Something that we're seeing we're seeing a resurgence in the world of, I guess I would call it fascism, where one of the central concepts is this idea of a charismatic leader. And that's something that certain political figures have really hooked onto. And the idea of a charismatic leader is someone who is somehow the embodiment of the people. So it's not exactly this idea of, I'm a know-it-all, or I'm somehow superior and I'm going to impose my will on everyone. This kind of a messianic fascist leader sort of assumes that he embodies the collective attitudes or the collective desires of the people. Now, of course, the idea there is that, well, of course, there are going to be some people who don't share this vision of the charismatic leader, and these people, somehow they just have to go away, or they're misfits, or we have to get rid of them, whatever. But I'm wondering how you would categorize that kind of a leader. Would that be a variety of the authoritative leader, or would that be something different? How would you see that?
Okay, first of all, we don't pretend to go into very deep detail on different types of leaders, in the sense, because we basically want to get the transformative leadership. What we want to show is that the traditional types of leadership, which are top down, and the charismatic leader is also top down, do not achieve what we need today. Like I said from the beginning, and I have to emphasize this because people keep saying, oh, I need to become a moral leader. No. We don't say leader, we say leadership, moral leadership, which is different. So it's not so much one person who's going to stand out, is that all of us are promoting unity in the group and helping one another to develop capabilities, and we're all working towards the same goal. And so even though we don't talk about a charismatic leader, personally, I think a charismatic leader, looking at some of the charismatic leaders in the world today, they might be kind of a combination of authoritarian and manipulative. I think there's a lot of manipulative mixed in.
I guess that would be, probably.
Charisma. But but you know, it's not so much to criticize them or to make an in-depth analysis, but to say that we need something different. And you know, people, one little story that I didn't tell about one teacher that I had in one of my first groups is that he said that, you know, he was a member of his community, it's a rural community, and he got along fine with everyone. But then they named him to a leadership position in the community. And he said, I started becoming very authoritarian because I thought that that was what a leader was supposed to do.
Yeah.
And,
there's
and so
certain
I'm just saying that. So we're trying to help people become aware of the types of leadership that we see around them, and then analyze what results do these bring? Are these positive? Are they negative? Or are they a mixture? Or like I said, with the paternalistic, to some degree, a paternalistic leader, well, he gets things done because he does it all himself. There's unity because everybody's happy with what he's doing, you know, but it's not true. So you can analyze them and say to some degree, you know, they do this or they do the other thing. But mostly what we're trying to get to is that these traditional forms of leadership do not respond to what today's world needs.
Something I like in just noticing the cover of one of the books, there were pictures of certain leaders. You know, I noticed Abraham Lincoln and others. Because the thing that concerns me a little bit, in Colombia for a time, there was really, the thing was moral leadership, liderazgo moral. There was even one campaign where they said, we're just going to present this instead of talking about the Baha'i faith, which I thought was a little concerning. But something that kind of caught my attention was this tendency among some Baha'is is this idea that we've got that everything outside of the faith is somehow misguided, or they're doing it wrong, and we've got it right. And I think it's important to realize that to acknowledge that many people outside of the faith, many people who are not, you know, associated with the faith in any way that we know, are practicing some of these, and that we're not you know, we're not the perfect example, nor is the world outside of the faith doing everything wrong. Because I think a lot of us tend to become very insular and not really pay too much attention to what's going on outside of the Baha'i community, and we tend to overgeneralize, be very dismissive. And I think we need to be paying a lot of attention to what is going on outside of the Baha'i community, and realize that some of the Baha'i ideas are already there. Maybe they filtered from the Baha'i community, maybe not, but you know, we need to you know, be much more, you know, try to find common ground with people outside of the faith that are doing many of the things that we are advocating.
Definitely. I mean, and that's part of the whole focus of transformative leadership. It was to talk about Baha'i principles, but in non-Baha'i language. I mean, so if you get the book, I don't know if you've seen Liderazgo Moral in Spanish, but you know, it's filled with quotes. I mean, yeah, there's some quotes from Baha'i figures, but there's lots of quotes from, you know, Martin Luther King, Mother Teresa, you know, from many people. And basically what we did, and also some of the ideas. I mean, basically, we did what Baha'u'llah said we need to do, which is use his teachings as the balance, and then look for non-Baha'i authors who are saying something similar, and build on their ideas.
Thank you. Just hoping some others have some comments and questions. This has been a really interesting and very, very easy to grasp. I've noticed that sometimes presentations like this get kind of tedious. This was not that way at all. So.
Oh, thank you. Because it's not like what I usually try to do. Like I said, I'm much more with a workshop format and breaking people into groups. If I'm doing it on Zoom, I'll send you guys into the what do they call them in English? Salas in Spanish. You know, into rooms, and where you can consult about each other and come back and report on what you've consulted about. And so, I mean, I'm very much into use of participatory techniques. and dividing people up into groups, which keeps people paying attention, because you might not be paying attention if there's 10 people in the room, but if there's only 3 of you, then you kind of have to participate.
But that putting people into groups very often gets stereotyped. I mean, in fact, in Colombia, where I really have a lot of problems with that. And the problems are that it's often done without giving it much thought. I notice that the questions that you put to your groups are questions that are really provocative, but very often it's not that way. And
Yeah.
so you're carrying out this stereotypic scheme that's supposed to be the correct way of giving classes or workshops, but if you don't do it in a really thoughtful way, I think it just gets to be really useless.
Yeah,
So I noticed that the kinds of questions that you were putting people, I mean, they would have to reflect in order to answer those questions.
Yeah.
Just looking to see if anyone else. Keith, don't you have something to ask?
He can talk with me a whole afternoon if he wants.
Oh, yeah, I guess that's the reason why.
We only live 20 minutes away, or 30 minutes, depending on the traffic.
No, seriously, I had no idea.
Yeah,
You're-
I'm the lucky
you're
guy,
that
'cause
close.
I get to have coffee with Joan, who here is Juanita. Every other week, we get together and put our
Wow.
heads together and stuff, talk about this, that, and the other thing. And yeah, it was good. We both attended, for example, the forum on developing a world order that was sponsored by the BIC at this General Assembly time. There's a Bolivian that's the head of that. So it made it a very good, interesting conversation. And of course, we wish that the entire United Nations and all the world leaders could take transformative leadership classes, and make the world a whole lot better. Yeah. So it's a powerful program.
So I wanted to ask you, Joan, and I'd be interested from other people as well, whether you are familiar with the work of Ivan Illich and
No.
and the Centro de Información in Mexico, in Oaxaca. I went once to Mexico, and I spent some time in Cuernavaca, which was where his center was located. And Ivan Illich was one of the people who arose in probably the 50s or 60s, and then Americans became aware of him in the 1970s, the early 70s, which is when I found out. And he was one of those people like Paul Goodman, like I've forgotten most of their names, but they were all the people who were looking at new ideas, and not just child-centered, but just radical ideas for changing education from just being what it's always been, which has been top down and sort of military style, shut up and do what I say. And actually this has gone in waves. When I studied this many years ago, I found, Pestalozzi and Froebel and Rousseau and Montessori and Rudolf Steiner and Piaget. And I mean, there are a lot of people who have contributed to this. Even the great Tolstoy. Tolstoy started a school on his family property called Yas Napoleona. And one of the things that I was wanting to share with you earlier in your presentation was that he said that the children would come back and they want to spend the night there. And it wasn't because they weren't happy at home. They had food at home, right? They have parents they love at home. They have siblings at home that they love. No, it's because they were so in love with learning that they wanted to stay and just keep going. And this inspired him to write a whole series of wonderful teaching materials, which were basically lost for a long time during the communist domination in Russia, but now are making it into print. not just in Russian, but also in English translation. And I've found a bunch of the materials, and I mean, he was a phenomenal author. And because of that, and because of his living most of his life close to the peasants, and 90% of the population of Russia was peasants, you know, he really had a very good sense of what their lives were like. And so he could speak to them. So I'm just fascinated that this is like a new incarnation, but it's turned a different. There's something different about this. And I think one of the differences is that you're encouraging people to take leadership. And this is, you know, I think that once you get people to take seriously the idea of taking leadership over their own education, as well as assisting with the education of others, it makes a huge difference. It really does, because the paradigm, even when we look at progressive revelation, is there's still a teacher. There's a teacher who's a progressive educator, and they're going to implement a model with kids, and they call it child-centered, but very often it ends up being teacher-centered again, because now the progressive educator has to implement a progressive policy in the classroom. And still, like, who's consulting with the kids to find out what they need and what they want? And I think that this bottom up really, when you apply it in the classroom, you have to be paying attention to the needs of the children, whatever age they are. You have to, because bottom up means bottom up. It really means, you know, I'm asking my 4-year-old daughter, Ava, you know, what does this mean to you? What do you think? Right? And not because I'm being, you know, there's such a prejudice against that in families. They think you're coddling your children, you know, you're not exerting your authority as a parent, you know, they feel that you're being irresponsible. And this needs to change our thinking, to understand that our children are not to be bullied around. Because if we're bullying them around at home, then we're going to send them to school and they get more bullying, and then they go to get a job and they're bullied some more. It's like this whole paradigm has got to change. Fundamentally, it has to change.
Yeah, I used to get that complaint a lot, that I was coddling my kids. My idea was, okay, I'll listen to you. I've got the last word, but I'm going to listen to you. That to me is, you know, parental authority. If you can understand my reasonings, you know, fine. If not, you still have to obey. Now, of course, when you're, you know, an adult, things change, but you know, parental authority doesn't mean, you know, just listen to me and don't ask questions. But I've heard that a lot, that, you know, when I was growing up, I couldn't even ask questions, and, you know, I grew up fine. You know, that's the kind of discourse you hear.
No, let me just throw something out at the end. I see we've run out of time, but if no one else wants to say anything, I would just, for food for thought, in my 3 pages of notes, I even though I have Juanita's my neighbor, for contrast, some of the work I do as a school administrator, and which includes training other administrators, is to throw leadership into at least 2 other contexts. One is leadership and management. And leadership is very much connected to transcendence in terms of that leadership role of administrator is the holder of the vision. And they have a very clear view of the vision. That is even beyond the goals of the school. And they have the clearest vision, and they're always communicating that vision, reminding of the vision in conversations with the entire community. And sometimes it's expressed very succinctly in the mission statement of the school or the vision statement of the school. But it has, and those are usually just like one-liners. But when you unpack it, and then also to draw out contributions to the vision, because the vision always has to be advancing towards these ideal truths that Juanita mentions, towards perfection. And then the management role is very much connected to dealing with the organization of resources, human resources, financial resources, which there's no one's going to get to the vision without the means. So we need in an institution of any kind, whether it's a civil institution or the civil government of a city or whatever, you have to have both of those types of administrators, those who are managers, and those who are leaders, and the charismatic type of personality might fall within that. And we have some charismatic leaders in our Baha'i faith with our founders, but that their charisma was managed within service. They had in Spanish we call it don de palabra. They had the gift of the word. They were gifted with writing, with speaking, with inspiring. But that was all within this broader thing of service. And then the other thing, just to throw out, because we're out of time, was and then Juanita and I can talk about this later too, is I worked in schools, in public schools and private schools, and it's kind of strange because it's like the private schools always want to develop the leaders of the country. We develop the leaders, we are the college prep school. We're going to go out, and it's kind of the attitude of the Harvard gang, that when they are losing to Yale, they'll start a chant and they will say, that's all right, that's okay, I will be your boss someday. So it doesn't matter if we're losing, because we're going to be the bosses, because we go to Harvard and we are the future leaders of this country. So we don't care if we get beat on the basketball court. But anyway, that's the kind of communities I've been involved with, are these, the children of presidents and ambassadors, et cetera, et cetera. And so I'll include this in one of my papers for Stanford at some point, but I just put out in the magazine of one of our schools, I said, oh, that's great. And I did it very politely, very diplomatically, very nicely, but it was like, okay, if we're the schools that are developing the leaders, who are developing the followers? And then it goes, and so it's whole, and as Juanita was putting up the slides, I was running through my mind. I go, what would a program of followership look like? And a lot of the principles are exactly the same when you think about it, because it comes down to this idea that sometimes things fail not because of leadership, because of we choose the wrong leaders, we choose the wrong principles, whatever it is. We don't do a good job with our elections, et cetera, et cetera. And so when you get down into the intimate detail, it's like we are all, as Juanita said, we're all leaders and we're all followers. Okay, even if we're just followers of our ideal self or followers of our principles. And I think it would be an interesting conversation just to talk with people about moral leadership, but also moral followership. How do you be a faithful follower? What does a good follower look like and taste like and smell like? The whole parameter of what's a beautiful follower. And we have so much of that in the faith too, but it all seems to fall within this this grand thing, which transformative leadership brings out is that it's all under the umbrella of servitude, you know, whether we're followers or leaders, that kind of thing. So I'll just throw that out.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Keith. Thank you all for coming. I'm going to have to close down the session now because I have to run off and do something else. But this was terrific. I mean, Joan, I hope for a fruitful collaboration over the course of many years. Okay, between all of us, I'm very excited about this. Your contribution has been greatly valued by all of us, as it will be by the many people who will be watching this video. So until next time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Aloha.
Thank you. Thank you,
Aloha.
Joan. Thank you, Peter. Bye, Ron. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.